Hi, everybody. Welcome to Drumfills Kafé. If you didn't know, we are in the season number 8. We have more than 300 guesses right now in 4 different languages. I invite you to go on drumfillscafe.com. You will see all the interviews. We had David Garibaldi, Paul Bostaff, Don Lombardi, million of people pass on the show. I was mentioning articles and like contests and all in a previous episode. There we always have some stuff going on. I really invite you to go on that platform on our website, because there you will find everything. But we invite you to follow our YouTube or Instagram, TikTok, and all those platforms we are using right now, and it's just helpful for the platform. So let's go with our first the artist of the day on DFK in English. There's a lot of things to talk with, so I'm gonna welcoming right now. Hello, Dango, how are you doing?
Good. How are you doing, man? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I was telling you just before. I like the lake backdrop. It's colorful. It's nice. That's a cool
Yeah,
view.
really pretty. I'm not saying
Yeah, very
America
pretty.
has that much to see, but we've got some really pretty lakes for sure.
Yeah, that's a good view. So, well, you're super busy right now. You're touring all over the place. But before to go with all that, I was reading your bio, and I just didn't know you studied with Chester Thompson, and you had like a big background in university. That's pretty nice. Let's talk about how did you start playing drum. I mean, did you have family member they were musician, or you saw one guy is like, I want to be a drummer and it's what I want to do. How did that started?
Well, I had one uncle who played drums when I was a little kid, and I never saw him play, but he had played in college, and so he was very musical, and he became a music pastor here in the States. And then growing up, my mother was a music pastor, and so I started playing in church when I was 12. So I was in middle school here, and that's where I first got to play. And there was a guy in our church who let me borrow his drum set, so I started learning on that, and I started taking lessons. And then in high school is probably when I started to get a little more serious. I really took private lessons in Madison, Wisconsin, which is where I grew up. And interestingly, I'm playing in Wisconsin today. I never play in Wisconsin, but I'm playing here tomorrow, and so we flew in, and so that's why I'm out at this lake. But so I started playing there. I started playing in church, and then I started an original band in high school called Day of Reckoning. And we put out a CD, which back in the 90s was a big deal. You had to go into a real studio and pay a bunch of money and record. I think we had 12 original songs. So
That's
we
cool.
did that. So that's where I first started learning a little bit about recording. And then when I got through high school, I decided to move to Nashville, Tennessee, which is our big, music capital
Yep.
of the US for sure. And so I went
Yep.
to Belmont University, and that's where I got to meet Chester Thompson, and he was
Yep.
on staff at Belmont. So I studied with Chester privately for 4.5 years, which is what it took me to get my bachelor's degree. So I studied with him, and he did a lot of jazz and a lot of Latin. And then he also taught our drummers class for all the drummers that we met weekly, but I met with him privately once a week to study. And then I also got to study with Todd London, who is our percussion
Okay.
faculty there. He's still there. So we did Latin and we did world percussion stuff. And then I studied with Brian Fullen, and he's
Okay.
another name guy that's done some amazing stuff. He played for Bob Carlisle, and he's done a bunch of rock and a bunch of Christian and a bunch of country. And he's a session guy in Nashville. And so I got to study with him as well. So I was pretty fortunate at Belmont to study with 3 different teachers. And I actually, even studying with Chester, I took the other 2 as electives. So I was studying with multiple drum teachers because I thought, well, if I'm here and I'm in Nashville, I might as well soak up all these guys that have all this past experience. So that was really what got me started playing before my pro career. And that was all. And I wouldn't say I learned as much as I need to. Obviously, you you get in the real world, you
Always.
realize you don't know all kinds of stuff. But
Yep.
it exposed me to jazz. It exposed me to Latin. I only knew rock. I only knew what was on the radio. I could only really play 2 and 4. And, all these years later, that's still what I get hired to play the most. But studying all
Yep.
that other stuff just opened my mind that, wow, the world is all kinds of music from all over, all these different styles and influences. And so that was amazing to be 19, 20, 21, 22 and start learning just a little bit about that stuff. And now I'm 42 and I'm still pursuing all that. And now I'm teaching students on my own and touring, and I have a studio as well. But it's a mix of all that to obviously get where we're at now. And just from the little I know watching your career, I know you've got to have a super vast background because your playing is unbelievable, and I can tell you've studied all kinds of different styles of music yourself.
It's what you say is super important. I remember I've seen long time ago a clinic of Derek Roddy in Montreal or in Toronto, I don't remember, and he was mentioning like even if he was playing or he still played death metal and speed metal and very technical stuff with double bass drum pedal, is like I always like to practice jazz in Latin and or even incorporate some of those groove into his playing for be have more vocabulary first, but more musical and more ideas. And
Yeah,
and he was suggesting too, it's not because you're a jazz drummer, don't try to play rock or metal. Like every drummer should have like to try a different style. And like you
yeah,
just mentioned, to go to university or well, the people they don't need to go to university, but if they want to study it like with a private like teacher, they're gonna learn some cool stuff. Even like you said, same for me. Like I really barely play a samba. Like it's very rare. But I mean, but I know how it is, and it just bring me other vocabulary, like you said. So when you play, you're more comfortable and you have more vocabulary in your own playing in a show. I'm sure that help you anyway and every day listening whatever kind of music, you know. So and and just to you,
absolutely.
and you were talking about like when you play at church. I know church is a school itself because you have to learn a lot of songs. And I remember because
Yeah.
you mentioned Nashville too. Nashville, where I lived, not like you, but I lived 3 months in Nashville, like maybe 6 years
Wow.
ago. And yeah, so I know the Broadway well. I was hanging out there 6 days a week after shows. So but I realized they have vocabulary too and songs I never heard about. Even if I like country music, rock country, there's song I never heard in my life. So you have to build a background. So for you, how is important to know many songs? Or you're the kind of guy you do only what you need to do, or you like to you dig into music and you like to at least that backbeat to know a bit the form. How it is for you to learn songs in general?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I was in my own band after college and toured in a punk band for about a decade where I was only playing that, playing on the records, touring full time. So I didn't really play any other music during that era. And then I moved back to Nashville about 12 years ago and I said, I want to be a hired gun. So I want to play for different artists, rock, country, pop,
Yep.
Christian, all these different kinds of music. So I started learning bigger vocabularies in each style. And especially country was the big one. I didn't grow up with country and people here just love country music in the South.
Yep.
And so I wanted to get into Broadway, and Broadway for us, when I say Broadway, I mean the bars, the honky tonk
About
bars in Nashville.
yep.
It's a culture. I mean, there's 100 bars down there, and you can play music
Yep.
every day of the week and make a living. So I started learning. I
Yep.
probably know 1,000 country songs now, realistically, and I probably had to learn 500 over a couple of years just to be able to play in that circuit. And then people call it, you get a request, somebody throws in $20, they say, I
Yep.
want to hear this Garth Brooks song, and you just go into it. You don't even think about it. And that did take me a while because I didn't grow up with it. But the cool thing with country, it's a lot like pop, it's a lot like rock. It's about the song, it's about structure. You kind of know it's going to be the same format of verse, chorus, bridge. Like you start to learn those things, and each artist has their own, thing that they might do in the song. So I always ask if I don't know the song well, I say, who's it by? And if they tell me the artist, I go, okay, I know 6 other songs by this artist. So I can kind of give it a good fake, professional, fake job of what I think it'll sound like.
Yeah.
But that's if you're like those gigs are 4 hours, and I'll do a lot of those when I'm home, and sometimes two in a row where I'll play 8 hours straight. So you're playing tons of material. You
It's
can't
a lot.
master it all. You're really trying to do the best you can, and then just play with good musicians and start and end the songs together. But you can't. It's not the same as playing an artist gig. An artist gig, you have like I'm out with Scott right now, the Creed singer Scott Stapp. We
Yep.
play the same songs every night, so I know them inside and out. I could start anywhere in the song and know where I'm at. It's not like that when you're doing a 4 hour set from my experience. So with Scott, I learn the songs exact. I often chart if I go play for a new guy, especially if I have to learn songs like, hey, an artist just hired me and I'm gonna go fill in for the weekend. I'll chart them all. I have them on my iPad so I can read it. And we may not even rehearse. You may just jump in. I'm sure you do that as well. And so you really
Yep.
have to be able to read on the fly. But if I play with them a few times, I try to go, okay, I'm not going to use charts. I memorize these now, And so then I internalize it as I start to play them. And for me, writing out the charts by hand helps me visually be able to remember it when I'm
Yep.
getting to sections. But again, we're talking about basic stuff. I'm not talking about prog or metal or,
No, no.
some of that stuff is, ripping jazz stuff. You have to be able to read the chart. But this is stuff that pop music, country, rock, that kind of stuff
Yep.
where you're able to memorize it. So that's where I'm at, and
Just
that's how I typically do learn the songs.
the basic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just to the people who are watching the show, you're the drummer from Scott Stapp, the previous singer from Creed, actually. So it's a good gig. You do a lot of shows. How that happened? You got a call. You met him on another gig. You were house band. How that you have been connect with that powerful singer?
Yeah, and that's a great question because people always ask in Nashville, how do you get onto a gig? And it's so much of who you know and timing because there's a million good players out there, just like probably where you live and where I live. There's great players all over the world, and a lot of it is being in the right place at the right time, but a lot of it's just who you meet. So I was playing on a country gig, and I met this bass player, and we started talking. We were just doing a showcase, so it was like 4 songs, a record label, a couple record labels were coming out to hear this girl sing. So we're playing these country songs, and afterwards I'm talking to the bass player, and I just said, "So what do you do outside of this?" And he said, "Oh, I play for Scott from Creed, and he played for Tiffany as well, the '80s singer." And this is my good
Yep.
buddy Sammy now, but this was almost 10 years ago. And as I got to know him better, he was also in the band Everclear, which was a big rock band in the '90s. But this
You're
guy's
clear.
done a
Yep.
lot, and he just said, "That's what I do." So I said, "Hey, if you ever need a drummer, let me know." And you kind of say it jokingly because most of the time
You don't know.
you play with
Yeah,
somebody,
exactly.
yeah. Unless you play with somebody a bunch, it's not usually like they're gonna call. But 6 months later, he called and I was on another tour, and he said, "Hey, we need a guy for Scott. Can you be ready in 2 weeks?" And I said, "Sure, send me the
So,
songs. I'll be
yeah,
there."
let's go.
And
Yeah.
so I learned the songs and we went into rehearsal. And I was actually flying to Finland that week. And I said, "Hey, I'm going to Finland and to Norway for these shows." I said, "I cannot bail on this band." I was playing this band called Fireflight. They're a Christian rock band. And I just said, "It's too last minute. They can't change their flight. So I got to go do these shows, but then I'll just be ready." Because he kind of was like, "Well, can we meet together before and talk through the songs?" But I just said, "You'll have to trust me. I'll learn them." So I think I learned 30 songs when I started the gig with Scott. And it was like all the Creed hits. And then Scott had a couple solo records out. So I'd learned most of that stuff and went into rehearsals. And then our first gigs, this was back in 2015. So yeah,
Okay.
8 years ago now. And
Wow.
our first gigs were in South Africa. And I'll never forget, I had never been anywhere like that. And one of the most beautiful places I'd ever seen.
Yeah.
And my first show with him, we're up on stage and there's a safari behind us. And I'm looking and there's just like giraffes and lions and stuff. And I thought, is this real world? Like, how
Is
did
this
I end
real?
up here? So
That's cool.
yeah, who would have ever thought? But that was how it started with Scott. And then you just stick around, you become close with people. Scott's a great guy to work for. And he, over all these years, he's kept us as a band. So we've had the same lineup. And even occasionally we'll have to have guys sub in. But I mean, it's been the same band for close to a decade. So that's how it all started for me with Scott.
Well, congrats for that. And it's I can understand like there's different way to do that as a producer and as a singer. Some singer they like to have the same house band. They kind of are becoming the band with the guy
Hmm.
for a long time. It's a safe house for them. But some they like to every 2 years change one musician or change the band complete because they're gonna be like will be a new sound, new blood, new. It's really depend of how that manage. I think it's worth it to keep with the people because like you said, you can like in 1 second you know the song and there's no even you make a mistake you know so much the song you can cover it and nobody will notice whatever and he will look at you and you have eye contact and I'm sure you know how to react at some point a punch or a breakdown or whatever stuff on happening on stage, you know what I mean? So it's good for
Yeah.
you. It's a solid.
And and with an artist like Scott, even though we do the same songs we have for all this time, he had solo songs here and there, but we're gonna play these hits
Yeah.
forever with arms wide open. People are gonna hear for the next 100 years. And what's cool is we don't play to tracks with him, and so even though I'm playing with a metronome in my ear, the songs flow from night to night, and he might talk for 5 minutes between one, and we might just jam behind him, and we might go into something and sort of, it'll be something inspirational where we just are improvising on the spot and go into it, and then we'll just kick into the song. And so we do that almost every night where it's not the same. And that's really fun. And
Mhm.
that comes from playing with these guys, but also because we've been together a long time. So we kind of know what to do and just where to
Yeah.
follow each other. But I've seen the same thing in Nashville. Some artists keep their people 20 years and some fire their bands all the time. And that's just, I've been fired from gigs along the way. And so I always try to encourage people. It's just part of this career. You can't,
Yep.
you can't hang on one gig forever. I love playing with Scott, but
Totally.
he could fire me tomorrow just to try to go for a new direction. And that doesn't mean I did anything wrong, and he could just
Yep.
change his mind at some point. It's okay.
Yeah, totally. It's important to it's a very good point. So many people, they take it too personal. It's like, what I did wrong? Did I sucked that night playing? No,
Yeah.
sometimes it's just like it happens, or sometimes there's no connection to with an artist. I would talk to myself long time ago, around 15 years ago. I got hired for one singer. I did 2 3 shows with him, and even me, after the third show, I talked with him. I'm like, I think it won't work, and he's like, I think it won't work. It was just like energy wise on stage, and my head was everywhere. I have like 25 shows going on with other production and artists. So it's part of the game, and it's you have to deal with. Actually, talking about that, you're very active. Okay, I like it on social media. I mean, you have cool picture of your show or your kit in studio. You always try to look super pro. I mean, it's you I don't know you that much, but what you present is a very good drummer, organized. You have your things, your drum look cool, and I now for real, I think it's nice to see that, because sometimes because you're really a good balance, I think, of you are online, but you live the reality of gigging, because there's so many people there. They will have like 2 million of viewers, but they don't do one show a year. So I think you have a very good balance, so how do you do that? I mean, I think it's cool for the people listening to add that balance. Are you really social media, or you do it because you just publish when it happens and it goes normally, you know what I mean?
So I grew up reading Modern Drummer magazine religiously and looking at the ads and looking at the pictures. And I remember seeing Josh Freese and Abe Laboriel
Yep.
Jr. and these guys, and I was like, I want to play DW one day. I want to endorse them, and I
Yep.
want to play Peisty because of those two guys. And so
Yep.
I was so into the look of trying to get pictures of drum sets, and nobody ever takes pictures of drummers that often. And so that just always fascinated me. So all my years of having drums, I'm always taking pictures of my own drum setup because there's a cool background, whatever. And as I worked along in my career, I eventually was able to work with those companies. And I've been with DW over a decade now. And Peisty, I
Yep.
think this year is my 15th year. And Evans, I think it's
Nice.
either my 19th or 20th year. So, and ProMark's maybe 10 or 12. So my companies have been with a long time. And so I just remember when I started touring, I talked to some guys in bigger bands. I said, what do you do for advertising? And they said, well, always have pictures and send them to your companies. If they don't use them, that's fine. But if you're sending them pictures, they just know you're working. And so I still do that to this day. I'll send DW stuff from every tour and when I'm out. And DW and Pisces, all these brands have way bigger guys and way better players and way like I'm a small fish in all these ponds, but I'm always working, like you say. And so that is one thing I try to be good about showing them. Because companies, all these companies, people always ask me, and probably you, how do endorsements work? And they want to get behind people that are working all the time, that are getting their product out there. So I do the same thing with social media. And I don't do it like the kids who have millions of followers. I mean, there's people out there who just sit in their room, make videos every day, and they're unbelievable. I don't really have time for that. But if I'm doing a
Not often.
session, yeah, if I'm doing a session, I put my camera on and I have a studio and I get pretty good sounds there. And so whether I'm tracking country or pop or worship, I'll usually record a clip, just line up the audio, and I post that. I'm not great video editing and that kind of stuff, but I always try to just keep stuff up there so that people see this guy's working. And it's one of those things that really helps people remember you're available. So I know it makes you look too busy all the time, but I always encourage guys, if you're playing gigs, just post something. People want to see that because in Nashville, there's 500 great drummers they could call any
Yeah.
day for a session, but they might be on Instagram and be like, "Oh, I forgot Dango's got his set up. I should just hit him up." And sometimes that happens, and sometimes I get a call for a session, and they might have used a big A-list guy yesterday, but today they used me because I was available. So it's kind of letting people know you're available, and it's kind of for me just I just enjoy doing it. Like sometimes it's a bit much, and with I just I just got married and have family now, so I'm
Yep.
probably going to be on social media a little less. But if I'm on the road, I'm going to try to stay up on it. But I, ask me about the work, explaining a little more what I do in Nashville. I tour a lot, but people always say, "Can you make a living on that?" In this day and age, I have a hard time. I couldn't live off just my touring. I don't make enough money, and so I just don't think it's like it was in the '90s or '80s. People were making millions
Completely.
of dollars back then, and I'm super thankful. I get to play drums for a living, so I don't even mean that. I'm not down talking. I'm just saying I have to do
No,
more
no.
than touring. So I also teach. I have about 10 drum students a week, and so if I'm in town, I line those up on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, typically, because I'm going to be out on the weekends most of the time traveling. And then if I'm doing sessions, I've got my studio that I spent quite a bit during the pandemic to build. I bought a house at that time, redid a whole room, did sound treatment on the walls, the ceilings, so I can track in, at midnight and I'm fine. So same days that I'm recording, if anybody hits me up for a session, I'll do those. It's a little bit of extra income. I enjoy doing it, makes sense. And then besides those two and touring, then there's the honky tonk bars downtown. So on any given day, so I left today on a flight. I've gotten 3 texts today. Hey, are you available tonight for a gig? And I had to say no to all of them. But the principle is I play enough downtown, it stays in people's minds and they think I'm in town. And yes, you
Yeah.
always run the risk of like them not calling you going, "Oh, I thought you were on the road." But as long as when I'm in town, at least once a week, I try to get down in there and play maybe 2 or 3 times if I have time. And that keeps people calling. So at the end of the year, I've got touring, I've got my lessons, I've got my sessions, and I've got the Broadway honky tonk bars or any in town gigs,
Perfect.
which would also be like coffee shop stuff, singer songwriter. Hey, can you come
Yeah.
play these 3 songs for $100 or whatever? Like I still do, I do as much as I can. So I try to say yes to everybody, but all those together make up my income of a working musician, and that's why I have to keep all that going to keep it going.
Yeah, and it's good what you do mention. You were mentioning about like having different things. Some young blood, they're starting their career and they're like, I want to be in a band like Metallica and I will live just about that. It's cool. It's possible it will happen. But there's a big chance, maybe not. And it's not to not be positive or don't believe in your dream. It's just like it's possible. So it's very good to have to open many different doors. Like it's not because you're a drummer, you're just a drummer. You can be like in studio, you can be a technician. You can. I know so many guys. Like it's just for me, for example, I'm a drummer, but when I'm not doing drumming, I'm an artistic project manager for different companies, and we work with lightning and stuff. And I like to do that, and it doesn't make me less good because I do that on the side. No, I'm making more contact, and people call me. So
Yeah,
it's to keep yourself connect and be out there and because auditioning for something you can get a gig, I think, but you have to make those gig happening too, so you have to have a big network for you can still work around, because some guys I'm like, I'm only waiting for this audition for that band, but it won't maybe never happen. So you have to work and be open minded. I like what did you say about like student and like touring and be connect in different scene. So the people watching the show, I think you should do that for sure to open your mind. um, One more thing I say, you mentioned like great companies will be with DW, Paiste, other companies. It's important whatever brand you are, you first endorse the brand, I think. And if you like the brand, you will be more than happy to play with. They will see that and they will be helpful with you. I've been with DW for since 2000 for 21 years, 23 years now. No, 25 years. So
wow,
when I call Garrison or Scott or whatever guy, Steven, they are super cool, so they give a good support. They're nice, but you realize and anyway, maybe I'm wrong, but endorsement is not for free gear. It can be, but it's
right?
not that. It's when you tour, you fuck up something broke on the street, you need support. I
Yeah,
remember I was in Scottsdale in Arizona. I have a DW pedal and my pedal broke during the transport, not during my playing. We put it out, set up, broke. One call, we fix something, Guitar Center, pedal, and the day after I bring it back, they send me a new one. That's the support. It's important to have that when you tour and to have good gear. There's some drum, they're so cool out there with custom companies, but is the hardware is good enough to support that many shows like you do? People have to think about that too. So it things I like to hear when you said like, yeah, I like to see good product. And so if people are listening, think about that too. It's important. uh, just to continue on that, because the time fly, just finish that part of gear. Are you a gear freak? I'm gonna explain. Are you, do you have like me like 60 snare drum and but you only use three of them, or you like you have like a few and it's for how you deal with that? Because I know out there now there's so many great stuff. So how you deal with that for don't lose your money and your mortgage on
Yeah.
the drum? You
I
know?
would say I'm definitely a gear guy. I'm one of those guys that really likes to use stuff that I collect, but I keep everything looking brand new. I'm really
Yeah.
picky about, even on the road, all my drums, people are like, "Oh, is that new?" I'm like, "No, I've had this kit 5 years." That happens to be a lot, but my snare collection is 30 drums right now, and I think I have 5 DW kits, and I use them all. And so what I try to do to make myself not be lazy with it is, if I don't play a snare drum for a year, I say I'm going to sell it. Now, there's a few I'm never going to sell no matter what, but I make myself like I either used it on a session or I used it on a gig.
Oh yeah.
Otherwise, I go, what's the point of having this? It's just sitting on the shelf. And yes, they're
Yeah.
all insured, and yes, they're a good investment because you can always resell them. But I have, and it's not that I have every drum, I have more than I need. Certainly, I could play with two or three. But in my 30, they're probably 10 of those are DWs, and the rest are all like all the, I've got
Mix.
an 80s Tama bell brass. That's my most expensive, valuable drum. I've got a Brady. I've got a couple Craviatos. I've got three Dinettes. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, I have a good spread of like a lot of the big drums that anybody would ask for. Black Beauty, Superphonic, Copperphonic. And so most of them have got an 80s Gretsch USA. Just a bunch of good options. I don't have a ton of vintage stuff. I've never been into that. Like I have a 60s Acrolite that's like in mint condition that I, paid a bunch
Yep.
for just to get one that was super clean. But I'm not the guy who has I don't have a bunch of 60s and 50s and that stuff, which I think that stuff's cool. Just to me, it's the hardware is an issue. You can play it, you can record it, but sometimes the snares don't stay on, or you couldn't tour with it live. Some guys do. I couldn't because the hardware would break, the stands would break. So to me, I always love the new gear, and that's why probably every couple of years I'll sell a DW kit and get a new one just because I want a new finish or a new look, and I'll try a different wood. But
Yeah.
generally speaking, my snares are kind of the big collection. And then same with cymbals.
Yeah.
I guess I've got quite a few. I've
Yeah.
loved Paiste cymbals forever, and so I've got a good mixture of different lines. I love the big beats, and I play them on tour the most, and they kind of fit my
Yeah,
sound
they're
because they're
great.
all washy.
Yeah.
And I've got a set of masters that I'll take around Nashville for recording because a lot of people will be like, "I've never heard that. Doesn't sound like Zildjian." And
Yeah.
and Nashville's, got a lot of Zildjian, a lot of Sabian, and a lot of Paiste, but I get the most comments on the masters if I'm in studios. And then kind of my studio setup that you see online, the mixture I've come up with, maybe the best sounding recording stuff for me, traditional light ride, dark energy crash, modern essential crash. That combo I just love recording. So that's sort of a mixture of a few different lines. But anyways, all that to
But I
say, I
like it.
do have too much. Yeah, I have too much gear, but I try to use it all, and I really try to be thankful for it because those companies have been great with me. And yeah, I've paid for most of my gear over the years. Occasionally, I might get something free here and there, but all those companies have really supported me. They've helped me when stuff's broken on tour. They've always been good. Like some people who've never toured don't understand. If you fly in and you have to use a backline rental kit
Yeah.
and you
Yep.
play A&F drums or you play CNC drums or you play SJC, like you're not going to get your drums anywhere in the world. I can fly. I've played in probably 20 countries and had DW in every country, but if you don't play Yamaha, Pearl, Tama, or DW, there's a good chance that your drums are not going to be there when you fly. And so I just try to explain that to guys. If you're doing a lot of fly dates, you've got to play one of the big companies. That's the benefit of them. They're all over the world. They've got pieces everywhere. Just like any guitar center is going to always carry those big 4 or 5 companies all the time. So that's been a thing for me because I've had a few things go wrong over the years. But I remember on a Warp tour, I had a DW pedal have, a spring or something broke, some little thing. Garrison had something overnighted to me, and I literally didn't even miss a show with my pedal. I couldn't believe it. So that to me was amazing customer
That's a big,
service.
big difference. Yeah, for sure. And talking about that, when you tour with Scott, do you bring your own equipment or do you use backline or is a mix of both?
Mix of both. If we're on a tour, I'm always taking my own kit. If we take a bus out of Nashville, but like this
Yep.
weekend we flew in, This year we've only done fly dates where we fly everywhere. And
Okay.
so, I have a backline rider. So every time I show up, it's a DW with 13, 16, 18 toms, and I'm a 22 kick. And then I fly with my snare and cymbals. But I even always get my exact Evans heads. It's just, we have, I'm really fortunate with this gig. I get everything I normally play with all the time. But that
That's
said,
cool.
I should really point out too, Steve Loebmeyer at Evans and ProMark, the
Yep.
Diodario guy.
I know
He
him.
is maybe the best A&R guy I've ever had the pleasure to work with. And again, it's been about 20 years, but I've been in Canada and had something go wrong, and he sent me stuff from the U.S. and he's just always sent stuff. He'll come out to shows to see me play, and so yeah, I just can't talk gear without saying Steve has definitely been the man. And so anybody who's worked with Diodario probably has worked with him. And I know you're not Evans or ProMark, are you?
No, but I have a good relation anyway with them. Like the Dario, all the Larry, the rep in in Canada, they're amazing. The Davidson people taking care of them in Canada are amazing. Nice. I know Steve a bit. I've been working with a bit with Evans a few years back. And I back with Remo for a different reason, like personal thing. But like, yeah, amazing person, a good service, and right now it's very hard to find bad services. I mean, the people are pretty proactive, and particularly since a few years, the problem is the supplies. Now, sometimes they don't have what you want, what you need. So this is a
Yeah.
big issue. But it's not their fault. The factories doesn't have parts, but it's another topic we could talk about. But I wanted because the time flies, and I want to ask you kind of two, three more questions.
Yeah.
You were talking about Christian music. Some people they're not into that scene and all that. I know a few drummer they're really into that too. A few musicians, I mean, um, and it's really big production shows now. I mean, like back in the days was only church like very small, but now they have big venues and they have big events and I think it's great because it's not just the con like the that conference you go and it's boring and the music is what I mean, like it's like same kind of.
Yeah.
Now they have cool band, cool images, and I know you play with a lot of them. um how you like to perform with, because it's mainstream, but in this community or in that part is not radio, how you like to do that, because it's not, you won't turn like MTV radio 2 whatever and you will listen to that necessarily. So how you deal
Right.
with that when there's millions of listener of that? So it's cool, man. It's a very good scene.
Yeah, and I grew up on it again, being a church kid. I just realized this is an awesome opportunity. I enjoy playing drums, and if there's a chance I can do it to honor the Lord, to me that's important. So worship music's always been a thing. I'm now part of this band called Sonic Flood, and if you look them
Hmm.
up in the worship community, they've been around over 20 years, and they were kind of one of the pioneers of worship bands doing rock music. So in the 90s, they had some huge hits doing that, and they're still around. And so I play with those guys some. We don't tour much, but I do a handful of shows, probably a year with them. And so that's always been like an honor. I've probably played with them 7 or 8 years or something. But I still like, I play at my church every week, and it's a little more gospel based. Like I say gospel, like it's a little more technical and a lot of influence from more busier stuff, less rock, more black gospel is the best way I would say it, on the
Yeah.
influence on that stuff. And not like, I don't have gospel chops like the guys do, but it's more from that world. Like we have a couple drummers at our church that can just rip on gospel chops, and so I'm kind of exposed to that in that setting. That's kind of different, but I do both of those as well, and I enjoy that because it always pushes me on the fly. We're in a service and we have a band leader on a mic and we're all wearing in ears, and he's calling changes, and we practice the song, but now we're doing it different than we practiced. Now we're adding sections. There's a lot of improvising. So that really stretches me in that world. But then in the professional sense, and our church is big, so I mean, it's you would feel like a big production on stage with 10
Okay.
guys playing on stage and that sort of thing. But then getting out into
Okay.
the professional world, if I'm filling in with an artist or I take a tour doing something like that, then yes, like you said, it can be a mass appeal kind of thing. And I'm seeing that over the world. There's a lot of worship artists and bands who are touring all over the world. So if that's something you've never looked into, that kind of worship music stuff, I would encourage people, just check it out, because there's some amazing players in there. There's some amazing songs.
Oh yeah.
And even if you've never looked into it, it's just like anything. It's a whole nother genre that's worth checking out. So I enjoy doing it. It's never been my full-time thing because I've always been touring and doing something else, rock or punk rock or something, country, whatever. But I do always love doing worship, and I think it's something God created me to do. So I'll always do that with my music.
Yeah, it's nice to hear that. And you just mentioned something like we have in ears and all, because like the old cat, they can think like it's church and is a keyboard player, and like now it's full technology. Like I mean, it's
Yeah,
they have drum incredible. Like they have those like studios in it, like to rehearse. In ears, everybody like with track and calls and sequences, and it's big
yeah,
production, and it's nice to see where it is right now. There's no more excuses. Like I mean, yes, sometimes even here on my gig right now, I have a book and I have to write stuff by my hand because I like really written on paper, like some charts, but I use Fourscore with normally, and I write my own chart. But the people need to be adapt to that, and I think church is a good example of how it grew up so fast, and kids are crazy. And you were mentioning too, gospel shop and stuff. How you see you're playing as for you, like as a musician. I know you've been to university, but your own sound, like where you are at right now at 42, how you see yourself, like right now, and where you would like to see you in a few years as a musician, like as a growing up musician, let's say.
yeah. I would say at this stage, I probably play for the music better than I ever have from all my years of experience. And most of the time that actually means playing less. And I know it doesn't always mean, but we always hear less is more unless you're playing instrumental music or something. But most of the time I'm playing singer songwriter or playing radio hits. And I've kind of learned play the parts. I'm good at getting hired to go in and learn the parts and play them every night and try not to mess up. So I would say that is the biggest part of my playing. Um, but I mean, the biggest compliments I get are when anybody talks about my feel or my time. They say you're very solid, or we love the feel on this song, especially recording like that feel. You really nailed it. That's what I'm always going for. I would love to be more technical. I think we've hit a season, an era where so many kids are unbelievable, uh, as well as adults. And I've never been a virtuoso at anything. And I wish I was. And I have never, I mean, for all my hours practicing, I just have never put in 100,000 hours of practice. So I would love to get more technical. The hard thing is I don't sit and practice chops because I don't use them the same way. Like I would like to have enough that I can pull them off on a gig, but I'm never even on a gig where I do a drum solo. So for me, it's like I'm about playing the songs, I'm about playing parts, I'm about focusing on my drum sounds and how my tuning is, and focusing on really solid hitting. And that sounds odd in a day when everybody triggers and you know kids post videos where everything's quantized and triggered, but in a live show I'm not doing any of that.
Mhm.
I'm playing, it's my real sounds, it's my real drums, it's me hitting, and that's the stuff I work on, dynamics all the time. Because when I came out I was just a rock drummer or just a punk drummer. People thought this guy can't do anything else, and now I think, well, yeah, I do brushes, I can do rods, I can do a mellow song for you, and I can track it and it'll sound like it should. And so that's where I think my strengths lie, is trying to be versatile with the with with basic stuff. But yeah, none of my playing is the kind that any of these listeners. I mean, I'm sure a lot of your listeners could play circles around me, so I'm not going to say I'm Eric Moore or Vinny Caliuta or any of these guys that you mentioned. That have ridiculous chops.
Well, there, I think there's places for everybody. Like that's a good thing. And the other thing is like when you play with a singer or a band, you need to adapt your playing in some ways, and you need to play for the music. You need to play for the sound. You don't play for your own chop every 5 seconds. You don't need to play 100 notes in 1 second all the time. So the point is like I think the musicality will always come first when you play with artists. If not, they won't like it. You would probably gonna take too much space in the song. So
Yeah,
and I understand what do you mean. It's more important to focus on that backbeat, that groove. I remember like reading an article a long time ago in Modern Drummer. I was like you, a big fan, still a big fan, and I was checking an article with Puji Bell, and it was like the first thing I like is when I see people moving their head, like just following me
yeah,
grooving in the room. It's like this
yeah,
is my paycheck. After the rest is just like butter or cream on top of the bread, but like I like to see people feeling my groove. So I think that's the main the first thing. Hey man, it's over. Just for finishing, where the people can reach you for drum lessons, where the people can contact you. Where's the best place to see what do you do right now? Let's say.
Yeah, well, thanks. My Instagram is Dango Empire. Same with my Facebook. And I've had a website forever and it's been down this year, but all my stuff online is just Dango Empire. So Dango Empire. And you can find me on there. I've got instructional DVD. I do teach regularly and I do remote sessions all the time. So, like last week, I was doing a session for an artist in Australia, and there's a producer out
Okay.
there who hires me for stuff. So, I mean, you know how that goes as well. I'm willing to work with anybody anywhere in the world, and I've spent the money to have the technology to do it. So I've got a good setup. I can send good drum tracks, good sounding drums anywhere pretty much. So I'm always available for that. And I always, anybody who just wants to ask questions or whatever, I'm no expert, but I'm more than happy to share my journey with people. And if drummers following this, like, man, I'd really love to know about that, please hit me a message on Instagram or Facebook, and I will definitely get back to you.
I thank you for be there to accept the invitation. Thank you for everything. You're a cool guy. Enjoy the trip. Be safe. Have a good tour. Enjoy your new wedding, you're with your family. I'm happy to hear that. And let's keep in touch, buddy. When I will go to Nashville next time, let's go for a hang together. I will. I like Nashville. It's one of my favorite cities. So, and I'm not saying that to be cool with you. It's one of the my that city. I really like Nashville. And every time I go there, I feel home, and it's a great place to be.
Well, next time you're here, I'm taking you to lunch. Let's do it.
Awesome. I take it easy and enjoy the nice view out there. You still have time for good pictures.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm honored to be on here.
Take care. Bye bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys to be with us this week. Next week, other Drumfills Cafe. If you have any question, feel free to text us, please. Every week I'm receiving, but not just me. We are receiving emails like from people asking questions, like suggestions. So you'll be free. You will find everything at drumfillscafe.com. So I wish you a good day and take it easy.